Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to the Daybreak Asia podcast. I'm Dan Schwartzman. Doug Krisner is off this week. We begin in Japan, where Sanae Takaichi has become the country's first female prime minister. Takaichi vowed to strengthen the nation's economy and defense capabilities and enhance relations with the U.S. However, Takaichi faces several challenges. Those include discontent over the cost of living, dealing with the looming visit by U.S. President Donald Trump, and reviving the fortunes of a ruling party that has lost its dominance. For more, we hear from Rintaro Nishimura, Senior Associate in the Asia Group's Japan practice. He spoke to Bloomberg's Avril and Annabelle Droulers on the Asia trade.
So first off, we are seeing her appointing party rivals in order to secure her leadership in some ways. What do you make of her strategy so far?
First of all, thank you for having me. I think this is a sign of the reality in the Liberal Democratic Party, where any new leader, as we've seen also with Shigeru Ishiba, has to sort of balance out the power dynamics within the party. And for Takaichi, who won this election, not in an outright majority, but in a contest, has to try and keep unity within the party by bringing in her rivals. She named two of her rivals in the, or three of the rivals in the cabinet, and also had her other rival, Takayuki Kobayashi, in her party leadership lineup. So clearly this is a sign that she is not on solid foundations and has to balance out relations with different parts of the party.
So there could be a lot of negotiation, maybe horse trading. What is that going to mean for policy making under her administration? And does that affect the expectation that we will see expansionary fiscal policies?
I think to an extent it might be unavoidable at the beginning, at least, to see certain stimulus happening because of the need for inflation relief measures. The Diet will discuss and deliberate on a fiscal year 2025 supplemental budget in order to finance the inflation relief measures. And because the LDP and the Japan Innovation Party do not have an outright majority in both houses, they would need to work with the opposition parties. And naturally, that would require a lot of compromise and probably more spending along the lines of what opposition parties want. And so in that sense, there will be, I think, initially a boost in spending. But Takaichi has mentioned a key word, which is proactive but responsible fiscal spending. So despite this notion that she is a pro-spending lawmaker, she is definitely going to have to keep in mind the debt ratio and other factors that will, to a certain extent, constrain her ability to spend government budget.
Yeah, as you said, the partnership that the LDP has with Ishin isn't really like the coalition that they had with Komeito. So what's that process of trust building going to look like, and how long do you think it will take as well?
Well, I think the first big test will be this extraordinary Diet session that started this week. Ishin has been quite clear that they are not going to jump into a straight coalition like Komeito, and that this would be more of a confidence and supply agreement in which they would vote for the LDP or Takaichi in no confidence motions and on the budget, but on bills, on individual legislation, that's a different story. So essentially, Takaichi will have to negotiate with Ishin and also with other opposition parties to pass legislation. And so in that sense, the trust building will take some time. And I think at least until next year's budget is passed in March, I think Ishin will be monitoring to see if the policy agreement that the two parties signed on Monday is carried out. And there are a couple of non-negotiables that Ishin has mentioned, such as the second capital initiative, reducing social insurance fees, and also reducing the number of Diet members by 10%, which all of these are going to be some challenging issues that other opposition parties will not want to go forward with. So this is a tough kind of environment for Takaichi to be in, but this is where her leadership will really be put to the test.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of different areas still to be worked out between Ishin and the LDP. Both of these parties, though, are perceived as being more right-leaning. Does that also create a barrier for them or an obstacle to deal with other parties in Parliament when they're trying to also pass any measures around social security or cost of living issues, for instance?
I think that could play a factor in some parties outright just opposing anything the LDP and Ishin does. There's already been a lot of noise around both parties' desire to amend the constitution and insert the Japan Self-Defense Forces name into the constitution. There's also talks of completely overhauling the defense export rules that currently permit only 5 categories of exports. So there's clear moves already and a sense that this new government arrangement will be much more conservative and also hawkish on defense and security policy. And that could affect how certain parties vote in the Diet. But at the same time, because the minority government is only a few seats shy of the majority line, there are a couple of small conservative parties and also independents who might be actually more willing to work with a government that's willing to go beyond what the LDP was able to do with a party like Komeito.
That was Rintaro Nishimura, Senior Associate from the Asia Group's Japan practice, speaking to Bloomberg's Avril Hong and Annabelle Droulers on the Asia trade. Coming up, is Sanae Takaichi Japan's new Iron Lady? We'll hear more from Bloomberg opinion columnist Gearoid Reidy. Welcome back to the Daybreak Asia podcast. I'm Dan Schwartzman. Doug Krisner's off this week. As you already heard, Sanae Takaichi has just been confirmed as Japan's first female prime minister. But more important than her gender might be her taste for headbanging in music and politics. That's according to Bloomberg opinion columnist Gearoid Reidy. He spoke about it with Bloomberg's Annabelle Droulers and Avril Hong.
I love this connection that you're making, so draw it out for us. And I think at least we can say we know that she likes playing the drums to relieve stress. I'm sure she's had a lot to want to pick the sticks up on in the last 10 days.
Well, actually, to your point there, Takaichi herself says or has said in the past that she does not get stress from work. She says that all of her stress comes from her domestic responsibilities. But obviously, she's in a bit of a bigger role now. So let's see how she handles that. Yeah, so I'm trying to draw the line here between her choice in music and her way of conducting herself. The football manager, Jurgen Klopp, one of the most successful football managers of the past decade, he described his way of playing football, this high-intensity, high-pressure game of football, as a heavy metal football. So I'm attempting to coin heavy metal politics as the way that Takaichi will do things. High intensity, high pressure, and we saw that with her willingness to take risk in order to become prime minister in the first place, allowing longtime coalition partner Komeito to leave the coalition and to join a new risky coalition with Ishin. That is maybe a sign of some of the risk-taking and some of the bold choices that we'll see her taking now that she has the top job.
How might this inform as well, not just how she engages with opposition parties or party rivals, but with the US president, because that meeting might be among the immediate priorities for her next week?
Yes, it's certainly quite unusual, I think, for a Japanese prime minister to become, prime minister, and within less than a week, I think she will probably be meeting with President Trump, and obviously at a time of some tension. There's a lot of not too much tension on the surface, shall we say, but obviously there's still a lot of things to work out with the trade deal that was agreed earlier with the Ishiba administration. So far, I think the signs are pretty positive. Unfortunately, Takaichi, to the best of my knowledge, does not play golf, unlike her mentor, the late Shinzo Abe, who obviously struck a great relationship with President Trump on the golf course. But I do think that they'll probably have a lot in common. The president is known to like, characters, I think, like Takaichi will be, and people who profess to be patriots as she does. So I don't envision too much immediate tension there, but obviously there is a lot to hammer out with the trade deal that the previous government signed on to. I think one good sign that we saw in that is that Takaichi has retained the the services of the minister in charge of signing that trade deal, Ryosei Akazawa, who is now going to be in charge of the trade ministry. So she'll be able to lean on his knowledge of that deal.
Another immediate challenge is also going to be quelling some concerns around cost of living crisis, for instance, just inflation generally. Sticking with that idea of her love for the drums, do you think that that's something that can help endear her to voters in any way?
I do think she has two challenges, as you say. So the first one has to be tackling inflation, and she said as much herself at her first press conference last night, where I thought she conducted herself quite well. She shied away from any suggestions of controversial areas. Came off as being very pragmatic. I think that's one fear that maybe some sections have. Is she going to go down some of her more nationalistic, shall we say, tendencies? She kept all of that in check anyway last night, but she does need to do something. She needs to be seen to be doing something to tackle inflation, and especially tackling inflation at the checkout. Food inflation is the big thing that is stressing voters out, shall we say. She has said that's going to be her top priority. Let's see how much she can actually get done. Ishiba was also attempting to tackle it, didn't really get much done in the end. Talked a lot about these cash handouts that are now not going to happen. Takaichi is now going to compile an extra budget, and top line item in that budget has to be something that is going to that households are going to be able to feel, that is going to help them feel better about the inflation that Japan is undergoing.
That was Bloomberg opinion columnist Gearoid Reidy speaking to Bloomberg's Avril Hung and Annabelle Droulers.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Bloomberg Daybreak Asia Edition podcast. Each weekday, we look at the stories shaping markets, finance, and geopolitics in the Asia Pacific. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, the Bloomberg Podcast YouTube channel, or anywhere else you listen. Join us again tomorrow for insight on the market moves from Hong Kong to Singapore and Australia. I'm Doug Krisner, and this is Bloomberg.